Well, welcome back, dear friends, to another episode of the Artisans of the Horizon. And we have back with us a guest who we've had before, the Reverend Jim Keat. Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Hey, Jerry, good to see you.
Good, good. And Jim is currently in Michigan, though travels back and forth to New York for their job at Riverside Church, where you serve as.
I am Riverside's digital minister, and it's a role I made up back in the summer of 2019, and then it turned out to be a really handy idea come 2020 and beyond.
I love that. That's one of my things about you that I really love is that you have these really cool creative ideas and you like put them out there and they suddenly become a thing. And I'm like, see, this is how you manifest people. um, but yeah, and so you also are a leader in the field of digital ministry. And that's how we know each other and our work. And last time we were together, we were with Reverend Bethany and Jason, and we were talking about our like what we foresaw or what we were foreseeing digital ministry being in this year,
Hmm.
2023, which is not over yet. So we still have some time to see if our prophecies will come true. um, but I want us to have a conversation today about um, digital ministry within the church space itself and what is it doing in that space. And I'm using church in the sense of denomination. um, and then I want us to pivot a little bit later into having a conversation about recent events around the SCOTUS rulings and these trends that we are seeing in our country, and how particularly this trend towards not being empathetic and not being compassionate and demonizing helping other people, and what role can digital ministry play in some of that, like that tussle, I guess you could say, and like trying to push people towards a more life-giving way of being in the
Hmm.
world. That's one of the
Yeah.
things that I think is so interesting about some of the stuff that's happening, is that I don't know how you can live your life being so mean. It's not healthy. It's not good for your body. It hurts. Like, do you have a pain wish? Like, there are so many studies that have shown that people who have high rates of anger and aggression and stuff like that tend to develop cancers of
Yep.
different kinds and high blood pressure, tension, headaches, heart attacks. None of that's good.
Yep.
So why are we leaning towards that? So anyway, all of that being
And
said,
we also can't say that the internet is the cause of all those negative emotions. It definitely
yes,
can add to it, but people have been getting angry, since there have been people. So it's not
right,
like it just started with the internet.
right.
Every new invention might accelerate or augment things in different ways, but it also accelerates and augments some of the solutions of peace and happiness and empathy. So well, that's I'm getting ahead to part two.
So tell me a bit about like what are you seeing right now happening in our denominations around digital ministry, particularly like, so you and I have been doing this for a while, and we've definitely seen some changes. So what are some of those changes? What are some current conversations people are having, at least where you are, um, and like shed some light on that.
Yeah, one I would say just in the life of a church space, there are some churches, some faith leaders, some congregations who are still, all in and sprinting in all things digital in the
Mm-hmm.
ways that it impacts and reshapes their ministry and how it's reflecting in the culture around us and how it's shifted and shaped and reshaped. But at the same time, there's probably just as many, maybe more, who are thinking, all right, back to the way things used to be, and just prioritizing the things that were the only sole focus, pre-pandemic. And they kind of just experienced 2020, 2021, 2022 as this kind of like, all right, we did some new stuff because we needed to in that moment, and we no longer need to. And to be clear, there might be some congregations for whom that's true. They were truly leaning into and serving their particular parish, and their parish for a season needed certain things and now they don't. But my fear in that is you're missing out on the potential and the opportunity and just how the wider culture has shifted. So I have a little bias, but I still think it's backed up. That culture has gone through a substantial shift, that everyone is impacted differently. I mean, workplaces are having this battle right now. Is like, we need you to
Yeah,
come back to work. Come on, Google and Salesforce and whomever. Um, Not that we have people haven't been working. We need you to come back to the place where we can watch you work. Is really what it
right.
means. Uh, but so I think churches are struggling with that as well in the returning back and not just back to the building, but back to the way we used to do things. And sadly, that often means letting go of some of the um, digital learnings and lessons and insights and practices that they've picked up along the way. I've often said that, you know, the season of the pandemic, for some people, they see it as a band-aid. We just put something on to make us feel better. But I'm like, no, these were some new muscles we all developed, and we need to
Yeah,
keep stretching them and growing them and using them in new and necessary ways. Like, for example, I haven't responded to this email yet, but I think he teaches at Union Seminary. He's connected to Union. He does stuff at Riverside sometimes. I don't know him very well. He emailed me with some concern about when we have people at Riverside will have often someone who's not in the building leading parts of the service. So it's usually
yeah,
pre-recorded. A lot of times it's me, congregants reading scripture. And he was like, when someone's in the nave leading the liturgy, I can still see them sitting in the chancel, and I know they're still present with us. But when someone's leading online, they're on screen for 4 minutes and then they disappear. I don't know where they are. And I'm like, okay, you don't. I don't know if you get it. And the biggest thing I don't think he gets. So he had a long email insinuating he wants to go back to, like, we got to really see everybody and it's important to be physically connected. And I'm not saying it's not important for that, but he's not getting that at Riverside, and this isn't true in every context, most of our worshiping congregation is not in the building.
right.
They're mostly watching through a screen. So there's a tension already of people want to just revert to prioritizing the physical experience,
Hmm.
and they miss out on the current or potential reach and engagement that exists if you just learn we live in this broader digitally connected space.
Hmm.
And it might cause us to shift things. That's I think the threat of, are we willing to shift how we've always done things for the
Yeah.
sake of how the world has shifted and the potential that could come if we, you know, ebb and flow with that move as well. So that's one. Churches sadly leaning back into it. And then there's just larger trends in technology, you know, the death of Twitter and, you know, the rise of VR and all those things. And I think that again just shows how the wider world is engaging digital technology differently. And hopefully the
Hmm.
church is, you know, swimming in those waters appropriately as we go.
I love all of that. That was beautiful. Well done. I think that point though is really interesting because I think that's one of the things I'm getting ready to do a panel. Well, this will probably go up before the panel happens, but in Baltimore on how to do digital ministry, and I'm going to be. I'm not the main speaker. I'm just hosting and being the queen that I am. And my panelists are going to talk about digital ministry from different vantage points, but that's one of the things that I really want to emphasize for that panel is that digital ministry is not the same and is not intended to be the same as what we do normally or we did before digital ministry became a thing. And it's not the same as the back in the day when we had televangelists, where they would
Yeah.
go on TV and their service was on TV because that was a broadcast.
Yep.
And that's a difference. And this is not a broadcast. This is an engagement.
Yep.
Uh, and also, I know right now diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff is really not something people like talking about. But one of the reasons why that's so important, especially in workplaces and in churches, particularly with those who are ordained and we get to see on the altar, is because people always feel more like they belong when they can see somebody
Yep.
representing them, their consciousness, how they are in the world.
Yes.
And so if we have a congregation that has people who are members online, they need to see somebody who is
Oh yeah.
also in front of
Oh
a
yeah.
screen. Um, so it's a part of building a community, and it's part of an extension of, like I like to say, we need to extend the sanctuary to the streets and then from the streets to the screens. There should not be any space where God is not present.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like
yeah,
to think we've just added a bunch of the back row just is a little further away. You know, there we
yeah,
instead of building a new balcony, it's just like it's in the comfort of your home. It's still the sanctuary just got bigger. You're still a part of the space. It just lets
right,
you beam in these ways and participate and experience it.
yeah,
That's how I enter the theological conversations around communion in digital spaces. Like Well, how far away is someone where they're not allowed to take it? Like if they're
Right.
outside of the nave or outside of the sanctuary, is that like too far? No, we just push the limits. We're just moving the boundaries. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's all sacred
And
anyway.
can we exactly? It's inherently sacred already. Our magical words and our vestments and all our shenanigans does not make it holy. It's already
Yep.
holy.
Yep.
So
We're just
like,
trying to highlight what's already been there. Yep.
right, exactly. Newsflash. And it's all imaginary to begin with, but
Yeah.
don't tell the bishops. But yeah, it's but that I think also too comes into play. That this is something I think this is inadvertently the ministry part of digital ministry, is that it is forcing us to lean into, do we really trust that the Spirit is in control in this situation?
Hmm.
And that the Spirit is the author and the finisher of all good things.
Yeah.
Because if not, then what is the point of the life of faith?
Yeah.
You
Well, I don't
know?
know. I think the spirit's only working if I'm comfortable, right? Isn't that how it works? Is if it goes outside of my comfort zone, then I don't know. She doesn't go there.
Well, I don't know. But it's it's one of those things, and I find that people really, especially church hierarchies, really
Yeah.
struggles with believing that much. I'm like, okay, that's fine if you have a limit to your faith. That's a part of being human. But
Yeah.
having a limit to your faith doesn't necessarily mean it can't be stretched a little bit further,
Yeah.
right? It just means that that's where you have some growing to do. So why
Yeah.
do we in the church run to demonize really quick instead of being like, hey, let's lead with curiosity? We teach people in CPE that, and we always tell them, lead with curiosity, ask the
Yep.
question. Um, but we don't do that actually in general practice.
Well, I think sadly, a lot of that probably comes down to people sitting in a room are more likely to make a donation than the people who are watching from their living room online. So we still put a monetary value to the goods and services of the church rather than recognizing, no, it's all supposed to be given away anyway, but then somehow we need to fund the thing. So maybe the whole conversation about, it's long overdue, the conversation about new funding models for ministry, because,
Yeah.
once upon a time, give your tithe to the church was a cultural norm because the church was often the entry point for doing good charity in the world. But now it's like, I donate to this. I just donated to Ryan Trahan this morning with his new penny series raising money for a water organization. It's like, so we just people give differently. And
Right.
churches are still fixated on give the way we used to give,
Right.
make tithing great again or something. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. Um, and I think that just is in the water of all this digital stuff. What's the cost? What's the benefit? Where are we going to get returns? And sadly, you know that saturates a lot of thinking. And budgets are a theological document. I think they do reflect where you
Mm-hmm.
prioritize. Um, but if we also only make decisions based on the impact they have on a bottom line of a budget, I feel like we're missing a bit of what this whole experiment called church is supposed to be about. So newsflash, it's not about capitalism. It is only in dismantling it, but it's not about
Mm-hmm.
profiting from it.
Right. Right. And also too, why is it so erroneous for the people of God to be empowered to experience God on their own terms?
Yeah.
And the video
Or
you
in
did,
those in between spaces, where when
right.
you're standing in line doing this, and why can't we have, remind them of the holy in those everyday moments? Like that should be what we've been trying to do all along. Why do we try to bottle it all into 1 hour a week in a special place? And if you can't come to that location, you don't get to drink the magic Kool-Aid. It's like, no, let the genie out of the bottle. We all get this thing.
Well, and also too, I think this is particularly around progressive churches. I think this is something that is a stickler for me. And like, this is one of the reasons why progressive churches are declining, quote unquote, in membership, because we are so hesitant to do anything that we consider to be similar or the same as evangelical churches or more
Yeah.
conservative churches. And I'm like, okay, but let's put a pause on that form of elitism. I was interviewed recently for a religious article about a course that I had taught back in May. And in the I clearly something happened in the interview because I guess the Holy Spirit showed up because I said a whole bunch of things that ended up not getting included in the essay, including that progressive Christianity is extremely elitist. Um, but anyway, so apparently people in their editing room did not like that. But that's all right because I say it openly everywhere. But anyway, but this is one of those things where I'm like, okay, but if we put that aside for a moment and say, is this thing that evangelical churches are doing, is it bearing fruit?
Yeah.
And if it is, then that means it's benefiting the people of God, and we need to be doing it also. And maybe we could do it a little bit better. Maybe we can do it a little bit different. Um, but it is something that we need to do. Um, and I think that that's one of the reasons why progressive Christians actually, for the most part, are a really well kept secret because we're not promoting or
Yeah.
proclaiming the gospel of inclusion, the gospel of radical love, the way that evangelicals are doing it.
Yeah.
And they're doing it without any hesitation.
Yeah, it's partly we don't know how, like we don't always know how to use the tools. Are it also, I mean, as compelling of a message as it is, it sadly isn't, it doesn't trigger the same,
Yeah,
primordial nerves of these people are going to hell and join together to say that we're right and they're like people love the division of I'm in, you're out, I'm right, you're wrong. And our
yeah,
progressive message is always typically one of like, God's love is for everyone. So surprise. The
yeah,
secret is there is a secret. Um, yeah. And I thought for, I mean, I think in some ways I felt my tug towards digital ministry decades ago when I just kept realizing that there were conservative churches, evangelical churches, who had really great websites, but I was like, you got really shitty theology. And then there's
mhm,
these progressive, liberal, mainline churches with really great theology, a rich, robust theology, but shitty websites. I saw it in curriculum. I was a curriculum writer for a long time, and like these, evangelical curriculum things were like super well designed and looked cool, but the theology was just like
mhm,
flat and shallow and nothing and platitudes. And like a lot of mainline denomination theology curriculum is really
mhm,
robust, but it looks like they just designed it in like Microsoft Paint and then put it to the fax photocopier, and sent that out. And it's like, so can you have good theology and a good website and good design and good use of these internet communications things? I think so. I hope so. And so my life, at least for the past 20 years or so, has been an experiment of just finding out. And the
yeah.
answer is sometimes.
I think you probably do it a lot better than you think you do. I really enjoy Riverside's services and resources and your podcast. I was so sad when Be Still and Go was gone.
We're probably going to do some secret surprise seasons. It's just a matter of
Okay,
managing projects, but yeah.
good, good. I love it. I love it. Otherwise, you can sell it to me. um, and then yeah, so I agree with you 100%. It's either like we're really creative, but our theology is just not there, or our theology is there, but then our creativity is just not there. And it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a competition. And also, that's really weird to me because, and I wonder, you come out of a different tradition than I do, so you're actually closer to this than I am. But I partially blame Reformed theologians and Christians around this because I think Calvin, particularly, really did not like art and music and all that stuff. And so it got rid of all the stained glass and statues and stuff. And I understand why, because there was like an anti Catholic prejudice and blah, 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 blah. Okay. But I think that has spilled over in the
Mm,
subconscious of American Christianity, um, American Protestant Christianity, because
mm.
I think that is probably one of the subconscious things that's happening as to why there's such a hesitation around creative modes of expression. Um,
That's interesting, especially in the main line, because I
yeah,
think, yeah, they're because in so many ways, what the Catholic Church had pioneered was I mean, they were the center of culture, So like, now culture includes technology, but then it was music and art.
Right.
Stained glass windows were a technological invention to allow people to experience the story of the Bible through a different medium because they might not be literate or have access to the book to read it themselves. So they tried something new and it was beautiful. And now we just see it as fine art. But at the time, it was, the Apple VR headset of its day. It was just a new technology that people got to immerse themselves in to experience this thing. And then so much of the Reformation was this reaction against, included this anti-Catholic bias and led to, all the iconoclasts and, just go back to the basics and the Bible and Jesus. And we cut out all the cultural trappings.
Right.
And in doing so, I think you're ignorant because there's always cultural trappings. You can't ever step out of a location. You are always speaking from a time and a place and an
Mm-hmm.
experience you bring to it and a next step ahead of you and where it's going to go. And maybe that's where the evangelicals did pick up on it and they said, okay, we will immerse ourselves a bit more into the cultural whatnots of the day, whether it's technology or music. I mean, why is Hillsong music so damn catchy? That's another
Mm-hmm.
example. Good music, shitty
Right.
theology. It's like,
Right.
and why is the best music in progressives it's still like, a basic doon doon doon. This is a hymn with really interesting lyrics that you never would have thought of singing. Great. I mean, I'm all about doing that. Like we sing them on Pride Sunday all year long at Riverside. I love them. But I mean, Martin Luther wasn't trying to write traditional hymns. He
Right.
was taking the pub song and putting different lyrics to it. So
Right.
like why I mean, Semler is a good example. I don't know if you follow
Mm-hmm.
her on TikTok and everything, her song Faith. We need more artists like this who are
Right.
immersed in the world. And so the main line is still we do things really well. We serve the people who need to be served and we're meeting the needs, but it's a matter of we don't stop doing that. We transcend and include. We keep doing that and we go someplace deeper along the way to these next needs of society and the ways in which culture is expressing itself. And that I think is the thing, you know, saying that these evangelical churches have good design, good websites, shitty theology, mainline churches the other way around. Um, I think that we don't do the training. We don't equip mainline
Yes.
progressives to even know how to navigate. We know how to do things really well that have needed to be done, but we don't know how to do the things that are going to need to be done or
Yeah.
utilized. And there's just no space, and we're just so exhausted, and it's intimidating. So
Yeah.
to me, that's partly why we saw, everywhere in a lot of industries, churches especially, clergy just exhausted during the pandemic because we were
Mm-hmm.
obviously doing a billion and one things, but learning new technologies. And I think it's partly why it's easier for people to revert back to the way things used to be because it's the things they're comfortable and familiar with.
Yeah.
And like finally I can stop doing these new things.
Yeah.
But that's missing the point that culture has had a radical paradigm shift that we've all experienced. And if we go back to the way things used to be, we're just trying to implore everyone to going back to what they used to do as well. And
Yeah.
that's going to be just a losing battle.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's a church trying to say, let's live in the past rather than living in the present, let alone possibly even the future.
Yeah. Then we just become pillars of salt. Like,
Yeah.
did we
Yeah.
forget about that Bible story?
Yep.
But no, and that's true. And I think also too part of that is the reality that I like to call it the sin of familiarity. You know,
Yeah.
we always go back to what's familiar because it's just that it's comfortable, it's easy to do. There's no risk involved in it, and discipleship is nothing but about taking risks. You know, I point out often to people in churches that the early Christians went to their deaths singing praise, not because they wanted to show off or to placate themselves as they marched to being eaten alive by lions or whatever, um, but because they were convicted that their life had been changed, had been transformed, and that this guy that they followed, Jesus, really has done something for them.
Yeah.
And they took risks, to live that life and to be transformed, to be renewed. And that's why they weren't worried that, yes, they were going to go die, but they were singing praise because they were like, it's worth it. They took the
Yep.
risk and it was worth it. So, are we doing that too? Are we cultivating that same level of like, yeah, this is risky. This requires me to step out of my comfort zone. And if all else fails, it doesn't matter because God still
Mm.
wins.
Yep.
It's like I'm a universalist, so I often say, it doesn't really matter to me. Everybody eventually reconciles in Christ. I have a great sermon called "The Eventually," where I'm like, everything revolves around the eventually. Yes, right now things are bad, but eventually things win. God wins,
Yeah.
God wins. And so, I don't need to be anxious about this current moment, although I am anxious all the time. Um, and I can just trust that spirit is involved and is
Yeah.
evolving and empowering and all the things. So that's my free sermon. You can make a donation on my website. But
Touch the screen to get a blessing.
but pivoting a little bit to culture, we talked about church and we talked about digital ministry and how it's like causing a stir in denominational spaces. But I want to talk about how can digital ministry cause and what kind of cause is it making in the culture, um, and how we interact with each other every day, particularly within our American context, our US based context, but maybe if you have other insights about other countries, you can share that too. Um, but I have seen, and this is not a new phenomenon, this has been happening for years, this push towards creating a culture that's much more um, isolated, um, much more demonizing of people who want to care. Um, we really have we've recently we've legalized discrimination, not being compassionate, not being empathetic, and all of this seems to me at least to be very contrary to the Jesus that I see in the gospel. And I'm wondering today, how can we as digital ministers optimize creating a more empathetic culture,
Yeah.
in the name of Jesus, saying like, this is what Jesus would do. What do you think about that? Do you have a solution?
Always, no. I mean, just hearing you describe it that way, it makes me think that there are obviously some things happening because of the digital waters that we swim in, uh, because of that, and other things that just have been inevitable. But it makes me wonder, like, could it just be like once upon a time human society lived in these small little pockets, we were just tribes, and then eventually cities, and every time the world got bigger we would define ourselves in these geographic cultural ways, and once upon a time the world literally ended across those mountains because no one who went there ever came back, so that must be the limits of everything. And then we keep making the world big, we realize how big the world is, but at the same time we make it smaller, we make it
Mm,
possible to have instant connections around the world, or like the society we live in a lot of big cities in America especially, where you probably know someone online better than you know the person who lives next door or across the hallway from you.
yeah.
And I wonder if at time the that fear evoking reaction in people comes in these online spaces because we're able to see the greater breadth and depth of humanity and the human experience, and then some people get intimidated by that, and so they just recoil to like making my little corner what it is, and like defining who's in and who's out, and so discrimination becomes law because we have to make it so no, that's not the way it is, and we shut ourselves down to empathy, which,
Mm,
which sadly has always been true. I mean, think about it. When a thousands of years ago, human civilizations encountering another civilization. Who are you? You're not us. My God's bigger than your God. Battle, battle, battle. Whoever wins, their God wins, kind of a thing. We're just still repeating that same stuff. And partly, I think, the parts of our biology that trigger empathy and things, it takes a bit of time for that to evolve. And our
mm,
technology evolves a bit quicker. We develop that much
mm,
faster than our biological evolution. So we are still like, really smart monkeys holding godlike technology and trying to
mm,
figure it out. So I think sometimes there's this constant push and pull. I like to think it has the potential to spark new connections for empathy, or if nothing else, I would say that these digital spaces and access allows the person who would otherwise feel completely ostracized from their community to have that life-giving and life-saving connection that they might not have otherwise. Like, think
Mm,
about the trans kid in some rural Midwest area who's like, how do I even articulate or voice my identity to the people around me when no one here, all it is Trump flags? Like, but if they can
mm,
have some online community, it gives them just hope, and it gives them connection, and it gives them a way to be seen and to see others. So I think it amplifies both. It amplifies the bad, and it amplifies the possibility for good. But that's just the story of humanity for the past, how many millennia have we been around now?
I have no earthly idea. But that brings up a good point in that technology is not the cause of all of this,
No.
and not by a long shot. Not just, nowhere, like, these devices did not cause all the chaos that's happening right now. Just as when the TV was invented, that did not cause chaos to happen that was happening around that time. Um, in fact, it was actually a tool for social change, in the sense that people actually, for the first time, got to see in their home, all the stuff that was happening. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, the civil rights riots and marches, and the Vietnam War, seeing the body count every night, and all those things. That was a
And
form of,
imagine if we could have been watching the vlogs from the people in Vietnam to even have a greater empathy of their stories. I mean,
yeah,
that's where the broadcast area opened up one sense of scale, but now it's at a whole other sense, which I think also gets to, for some people, it feels like chaos because it's just more stuff. So it's
right,
like, how do I navigate all the things? And so I think that's where sometimes people just go to the one voice or the one curator. And why
right,
do a whole lot of people only watch Fox News and nothing else? Because they just want to have it given to them. And
right,
I mean, that, I forget if we were recording or not, but it's that sense of cultivating curiosity. And people just want certainty, and they want someone to tell them what's true, which way's up, how it works, and they don't want to be invited into a process of questions and wondering and discovery, because that challenges things. It's
yeah,
uncomfortable. And
yeah,
liberals alike, how many liberals just watch insert liberal,
yeah.
bias station here, and we're not open to even being challenged or
Yeah.
confronted or those conversations.
Yeah, because an adventure requires us to take a risk, but it also requires us to step out into the unknown, to
Yeah.
be like Peter, who had enough audacity that he thought he could walk on the water. But then when he realized how risky it was, he started to sink because he didn't keep his eye on the prize. Um,
Yeah.
and I think in a lot of ways we do that too. We don't want to be the ones who walk on water, and who do these wonderful things. Jesus even said, "Greater things will you do when I am gone than I have done
Mhm.
here." Um, and maybe this is an example of that, you know,
Yeah.
and the ways that we're building connections and stuff like that. And when you become connected, it's really difficult, um, to demonize somebody that you've been connected to.
Yeah.
It's not as easy, because there's been studies that I've done on the psychological realities of internet connections and stuff like that, um, and there's been shown that there's high rates of people not blocking or muting people on social media because of a sense of shame. They don't want
Mm.
to, like, push somebody away because then they makes them feel bad. But then you
Yeah.
also have other people who are the opposite. They block everybody because they don't want to be held accountable for the stuff that they are doing that people are finding problematic, right? So it's an interesting phenomenon. I had another
Yeah.
point that I was trying to go towards, and it completely left my brain. I don't know. I should have taken some supplements to help my thinking. Anyway, moving on. But yeah, so this phenomenon I think is really important. And this whole idea that, fear is just excitement being held back is what I often tell people.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so, again, how can we be curious? How can we explore and ask questions and build something together with other people?
Yeah.
This is where I was going to go with it. Because we live in capitalism, and yes, I am anti-capitalist. uh, we have all been created or turned into consumers. That's our primary identity in this culture. And it manifests in really strange ways, including in how we receive and take in data. And that could be either data from the news or from the pulpit or from whatever. So I think that that's part of why so many people on the left and on the right, and even in the center, will only receive news from one station um, because it's a consumer, right? It's
Mhm.
just like we only want to go to a church that's a part of the denomination that we were raised in, right? They're the like God bless. I love Church of God in Christ, but they've had forever since their foundation that they were the only ones who were really saved, and not even other Pentecostals were going to be saved unless they became Church of God in Christ, because they have the secret magical whatever, and we do that too, and it's because we
Mhm.
all want to consume something that fixes everything. We want to
Yep.
take that pill that gets rid of all the pain in our spirit and our body and our mind, and that's not the way of God. The way of God is adventure and excitement and curiosity and,
Yep.
and taking risk. Um, so anyway, again, you can make a donation on my website.
Well, we often, you know, end up in comfortable and familiar ruts. And
Yeah,
so whether it's a denominational one, like this just feels what I'm used to. Um, and then it's like, and I think there's nothing wrong with that to some extent. My hope would be that we invite people to just jump over and discover another one, and to realize your rut is not the only one. There's a whole lot of rows on this field, and there
yeah,
a lot of them are growing some incredible things. And it's not saying to forget about or leave everything you've experienced behind, but just to zoom out and see a bigger picture, and that we're
yeah.
all, in many ways, many of these are working in a similar stream towards something. Or like, you know, when my wife and I were very late to Schitt's Creek. I think we started watching it at season 6 out of
Mm-hmm.
7, and we just binged the whole thing. It's like binge watch these streams, these ruts of faith communities. Like you don't have to just get an episode. You can like go in and just immerse yourself in as much as you can, and that's a
Right.
good thing. But then keep doing it and think about how that forms us as individuals. And if communities would do that, get out of their own like my team versus your team brand loyalty, but actually truly
Mm-hmm.
transcend beyond denominations. And then I think it also touches into like the very practical, why is it easy for many mainline congregations as they currently are to just lean into what we've done historically? Because many mainline congregations are made up of congregants who are largely of a particular generation, usually in the 55 to 75 category is stereotypically where I'd characterize them. Not
Mm-hmm.
all true. Uh, and so that generation has a certain familiarity with technology. And so
Yeah.
they're used to what they're used to. And so to say, put on this VR headset and jump on Mastodon now instead of Twitter, they're like, I have never even got on Twitter yet. I'm still just figuring out Facebook. Facebook, that's so whatever, 19 would. So it's the difficulty of, I think, needing to both
Yeah.
meet the people where they are, but then also be willing to do the necessary work to invite them into new spaces, both with the practical tech and with the ways it opens up thinking. I
Yeah.
mean, churches have always done this theologically and ideologically. We try to start with where you are and help you broaden in whatever way we think might be a necessary move. But I think we need to do the same in everything. For a while, when I was in New York, we had to rethink it because when I relocated and then the pandemic, we would have a monthly, we called it the Digital Cathedral. It was like tutoring in technology, which is also the name of a great book by Keith Anderson. He let me use the title for this class. And we would say, well, we would always start by talking about something that the church is doing in digital spaces so you can just learn about a thing. Here's a new thing we added to the website. Let's teach you about it. And then half the class would be, do you need help with technology? We will help you
Mm-hmm.
program your VCR, install an app on your phone, like whatever it is you need. And in my mind, empowering someone to have just a small win with their own personal technological life gives
Mm-hmm.
them the permission and the courage to take another leap and to try something new. So too often I think the technology is going so fast and some people are just like, I just still barely figured out how to make this thing turn on. And you want me to now do what? Put it on my face and do what way? So I think there's, in my mind, that's a pastoral move of saying we're going to be
Yeah.
present with you as these things are racing by, and we're not going to let you be left behind. We're not just
Mhm.
going to focus on, what are the teenagers using these days, but at the same time, we have to be engaging the world that those teenagers are going to grow up into, so that
Right.
we are where they are. I mean, this is the theology that the Little Mermaid and Jesus taught me. I want to be where the people are. Go to where the people are. That's what the church has always been called to do. And a lot of times the people are doing this. So are we there? Or are we telling them to put their phones down? Get in
Yeah.
church, put your phone down. Why don't we put the church on their phone? So then they're
Right.
in.
Right.
That
Yeah.
was that was like 2.5 rants in one. Sorry about that.
No, I loved it. I was enjoying the ride. It was lots of fun. You said something though that's really intriguing to me that I think is important. Actually, I have a note to say it at my panel. Is that digital ministry is not just for young people.
Yeah.
It requires all of the members of the body of Christ of every age. And if that means that we as a church need to have a ministry of tech support, and tech empowerment, maybe, then we need to have that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of churches who have like expressive art ministries where they get, like seniors together to paint or to dance or whatever. Like, great, keep doing that, but also maybe add a technology class, teach them how to do something, I don't know, word processor, or how to, I mean, certainly not things like how to develop an app, because I don't even know how to do that. But maybe how to build a website. Websites have come so far since the
Yep.
1990s when websites first really became a thing. And we had to do all that little, did you learn how to do that? But all that HTML, like coding and
Yeah.
all
I
that stuff?
I embraced minimalist web design because I liked the aesthetic and I knew I could actually do it. And it's like, okay, lots of white space. I can pull that aesthetic off because it's minimal coding. But yeah.
But yeah, but see, now you don't even need to know the coding,
No.
because it's all done for you. You just kind of clicking, clickety clackety, clickety clackety, and
Yep.
things happen. So that could be something. But that's a great point in that this is not just for a select age group, but it's
Yeah.
also a great opportunity for us to expand our understanding of what it means to be pastors.
Yep.
Um, and this gets to my other point too, and then we're going to transition into closing, um, allegedly. Never believe a preacher when they say, "Okay, I'm getting ready to close." um, but that also brings up to the point that I'm of the opinion that I think that our theological seminaries, one of the reasons why they're closing so quickly, is because they're not training clergy to actually be able to know things that they really need to know when they're in, especially in congregational
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah.
Um, and this is one of those things. I don't think I can think of a seminary right now in this country that would have a class or would even entertain having a class on technology as pastoral care,
Yeah.
which is sad. Like I would hope that like Chicago Theological or Union or PSR would be some of
And if
those
they
great
want one,
places.
they should then hire you to be the adjunct prof and teach it, right?
Please, thank you. Yes, I am very reasonable priced. um, but yes, and but I think that's really important. And in fact, I have the controversial opinion that I think the MDiv should be abolished because I think it's a useless degree, and I think we should be instead required to get more practical things like MSWs, MBA, an MA in nonprofit management. Because those are actually things that we end up doing in our congregational spaces.
Yep.
Like, yeah, sure, we can study theology. Great, cool, awesome. But
With
also,
an emphasis in theology as opposed to the other way
yeah,
around. Yeah.
yeah. I love that. See, you can be my co-assistant, my co-facilitator. But I think that's a growing edge. Some months ago, the Episcopal News Service did an article on their seminary in California in the Bay Area, Church Divinity School, and how they suddenly were so revolutionary because they made a decision that they're going to have hybrid courses completely as an
Mm.
option, and not only for one program but for all of their programs. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I'm glad your board of trustees came into the early 2000s. Um, but why is this new? Like when I saw the article headline, I thought, oh, this sounds cool. Let me check on it. And then I was like, oh, well, that's disappointing. I thought they were going to say the Church Divinity School finally decided that they're going to start teaching their seminarians how to do, website development or how
Yeah.
to do podcasts or stuff like that. And then this is what I saw. Like, well, that's disappointing. Um, so I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm just disappointed with theological education, is what I'm saying.
Well, and I would resonate with that and echo it to say it leads to this world that creates, niche specialized ministry where some
Yeah.
people know how to do that, but most people don't. And my other rant that I'm developing into lots of things, but haven't really put it anywhere yet, is my latest hypothesis that the church does not need digital ministers in the same way that she doesn't need youth pastors. Like once upon a
Mm,
time, a youth pastor was a new invention, and it's turned now into the one person who's really good with adolescents so
yeah.
that other people don't have to be, or this one individual cares for all of these people and the other real pastors don't have to, as opposed to thinking, what if we were all youth pastors? What if
Yeah.
intergenerational ministry was immersed into everything we did? Same for digital. It can't just be, here's the one person who knows digital and everyone else
Yeah.
does it the way they've always done it, but rather, how do we recognize we're all digital ministers and it needs to
Right.
be a part of everything we all do? And if it's not, you have to ask yourself, am I really leaning into the world as it is and as it will be, or am I just trying to serve the world as it was?
Yeah.
Nothing against serving the world as it was. We still need to keep doing that, but we also need to learn growing digital capacities, which, like you're saying, sadly, our seminaries are largely not empowering us to do, so that we can continue to teach these spaces. I say that as someone with a youth ministry degree in undergrad, so I have that specialization. I am a digital minister, and I'm here to say we all need to be these things, not just the one person.
I love it. I love it. And that brings into, the also another reality in that ministry is a team sport. You
Yeah.
know, it's not just the pastor's job, it's not just the youth pastor, it's not just whatever. It's all of us. All of us are called because we're all baptized into doing the work of Jesus, right?
Yep.
To being disciples. And so yeah, that's a great, great, great point. Do you think that we're moving into a post-denominational age? Or are we there yet? Or
Um,
I don't know.
I mean, so long as denominations hold the retirement pensions for pastors, it's going to be tricky because I think that is where a lot of it still lands on
Yes.
people want to be cared for in the retirement. They want to have health insurance. And I would say a marker of that will be when denominational youth gatherings stop feeling like a pep rally for their denomination and they start feeling like
Mm,
something a little bit different and even maybe existing in a broader ecumenical way. But I haven't yet fully seen that.
mm,
And I think there's potential in denominations. They become good systems and structures. Like, I think they're like roads. They allow you to get places and navigate conversations, and it can be helpful to be like, okay, I understand an essence of what you might bring with you based off of your
yeah,
denominational ideologies. But when they become barriers, they're obviously worthless.
yeah.
And I think they exist as both right now, which is most I don't know, probably a lot of barriers. I mean, look at the United Methodist Church. They're just building barriers and but there are some roads. Like I have a hopeful for a future where I can see a United Methodist Church and assume that they are an open, celebrating, and affirming congregation because of the shifts they're making. But then when it becomes lines in the sand and walls between us and them, so
Mm,
I don't know. I think like churches, it's gonna be a question. What's gonna happen to the smaller ones? And
mm,
largely that comes down to not is this the best model, but just in late stage capitalism, which ones are most sustainable. And so the
yeah,
bigger ones often
yeah,
have a bigger runway because their budget can just go deeper, and they might even shrink their staff, but then just lengthen their lifespan.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like the UCC had this conversation recently, or I saw some people talking about it, like how long until the UCC merges with the PCUSA, as a question of like,
yeah,
PCUSA is huge. They're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. UCC is smaller. Will they? You see that with small churches. Is this small church going to dwindle and stop existing? Will the big church eat them up? Is that good, bad, this or that? I don't know if I want to put a judgment value on it, but just say that it might be, if and when it happens, what do we do in that reality? And do we bemoan,
Mm,
oh, remember when it used to be this way? Okay, we can't, unless you build a time machine, we can't go back into the past. We can only go into the
mm,
future. It keeps going one direction. So are we going to just figure out where we go forward from here?
mm. Yeah, even in UU spaces, Unitarian Universalist spaces, they have been having this conversation recently about, because they just had their General Assembly, about changing their name because they
Mm.
have come to the realization that they have a lot of people with a lot of different ideas in their denomination, and most of those people are neither Unitarian or Universalist. So they've kind of moved so beyond their
Yeah.
name that they're like, this is kind of a little pointless now. And it's really just kind of a time marker for us.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. At one
and
point in time, being a Unitarian was a divisive thing. And I mean, and that's even two strands that merge together. And I always
right,
question, like, why did the Unitarians get put first in the name? You know, did it just sound better, or did they have a little more sway in the branding of this all? But yeah.
I think they were actually, I think Unitarians are older than the
Okay. So it's
Universalists.
chronological. I can
Yeah,
buy
yeah,
that.
yeah. So, but anyway, but that's a side note. But anyway, as always, Jim, it is such a good time with you. And I am so grateful for your presence in the body of Christ. Tell all the people about what you're doing, where they need to sign up for stuff. Are you selling a book? Are you, can we
Oh.
donate to something? Can we get you to sing for us with the ukulele?
Well, ukulele, yeah, they made its appearance in a video recently for Pride. Well, if you're donating, just donate it to Father Jerry. He's doing all the great work in the world, so just put it all there. Keep that good work coming. I'm on the internet all over. Riverside Church, trcnyc.org is where you can find a lot of that work. I do some work with a group called Convergence, which is like a collective that does resources and coaching and consulting. So I'm the director of online innovation, convergenceus.org. Um, and I'm always trying stuff, making stuff. You can find me at Rev Jim Runs is the social handle that it's a lot of it's shifting to. I've had a bit of a paradigm shift myself, so trying to lean more into life as a runner, but with a progressive theological and justice view, which doesn't always live in those circles. So
Mm.
I'm just having fun making stuff. Google my name, you'll find me. But just keep hanging out with Jerry because he's doing all the great stuff.
Well, thank you. I just try to share the space because I know a lot of really awesome people. Um, and I'm just like, I'm over here just happy I'm included. I'm just happy I'm here. That's really awesome. And one of the things, your website is really cool. And so people should definitely check that out also because it's a really nice design, very easy to use. Um, and I like I think it's your Twitter handle. It's like ideas done daily. I was like,
That might have shifted to Rev Jim Runs too. Did that?
oh,
Let me check.
maybe
Yeah.
it's your
So
Instagram.
I
I
think
don't
that
know.
shifted. I'm pretty sure that shifted. Yeah, my life used to be ideas done daily, and I had a project, 30 seconds or less, daily ideas, all these things. And then I just, life with the pandemic, life with kids changed some of that.
Well,
And
just so you
I'm a runner now.
know, you're in my mind when I think of your name, it immediately comes up as ideas done daily
All
for
right, I'll
whatever
take it.
reason. It just lives
I'll take it.
perpetually rent free in my head. And then the next thought is, oh, I wonder where Jim is running today. So all those links will be in the bio below, all the other things. I'll also put links to our video conversations that we've had previously, including some of the videos you've done. Um, and what else? What else? I think in all things, remember, dear friends, that life is short and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who journey with us. So be swift to love, make haste to be kind, and the blessing of the God who is the God of peace, the nonviolent Christ, and the liberating Spirit be with you this day and forevermore. Amen.
Amen.